I've been looking back recently at TV shows that I never got around to watching, but kind of always wanted to. And I've had Mad Men on DVD because I picked them up really cheap from a charity shop. In fact, I always wanted to watch Mad Men, just never got around to it. And for like 50p each or whatever it was that I got before, I'll get them. And I'll watch them one day. And I've had them for a couple of years now. But yeah, after some recent communication with an old friend of mine on Facebook about TV shows, he brought up Mad Men, or more to the point, why I hadn't watched Mad Men. I thought, you know what, I've got it, it's time. So I watched season 1 of Mad Men in this past week, really enjoyed it, and looking forward to the next 6 seasons. Did they do 7 altogether? I think they did. But yeah, for those who've never seen Mad Men, it's set in the early 60s, so it starts off in 1960, and it takes place within the world of an ad office. So it's a bunch of advertisers doing what advertisers do, but it follows this central character of Don Draper, who's like king of the ad men. He can go into a room and sell anything. And it's really all about him. Who is he as a person? What makes him tick? It seems not even his wife knows. Very little is known about him by anyone. He's a bit of a mysterious figure, but he's just really good at his job. As we follow him through his life and the other characters that he mingles with in the office, we get a real good picture of the period, of what it was like to work in that environment back in the 60s, when you had women just kind of really coming into the office, men and women mixing together really for the first time in the work environment. Obviously, this is just a few years after the war, 15 years after the war, but you know, it's like in that time, women have firmly kind of cemented themselves within the workplace, and men and women are working together. What does that do? 1, to the work environment, but 2, to the home environment. There's not many characters in this show, in this first season, that don't have a fling, that don't have an affair. You know, all the married men in this season, I'm trying to think of any that don't, but pretty much all the ones that work in the office that are married at some point end up having a fling. And I just feel like that is indicative of the environment which has been set up post-war. You know, people are having to deal with social factors that they never had to deal with before. And because there's a certain balance of power within that, it means that, well, particularly the men, end up taking liberties. That's greatly expressed through this character played by John Slattery, who's kind of like one of the bosses there. And he's a sex machine. He just goes after any kind of piece of skirt that he can get hold of. But the thing is the show is never gratuitous. And this is the thing, I don't like a lot of modern day TV shows that are filled with sex because they go for it and they show everything and leave nothing to the imagination. And it's really all about seeing the physical act than anything else. It's like, oh, we can get away with it. We can do it, so we will. Whereas Mad Men it's very much centered around character and story. Yes, there's a lot of people in this having sex. Yes, there are a lot of sex scenes, but you never see anything beyond kissing. It's all implied. It's all about the emotional ramifications of the act itself rather than the act itself. So as I say, you've got this central character of Don Draper whose job it is to sell something. And throughout this first season, we learn who he is. Now, I don't want to give anything away. I know it's an old series, but there might be people out there who've not seen this who might want to go and check it out after this review. But all I'll say is that there are secrets about him that are revealed over the course of this first season. You know, when we start off, we know nothing about him. As I say, not even his wife really knows that much about him. But we learn who he is across the course of this first season. And I feel like that's a great metaphor for the ad business in general. As a character, he has sold a version of himself to the world. He has presented a version of himself to the world that people have bought, but it's not the truth. The truth lies deep underneath, amongst all this kind of childhood trauma and a varied history that he's had. So he as a character becomes a metaphor for what the show itself is about. Basically, it's about facade. It's about the facade we put on everywhere, whether it's being the presentable housewife and hiding your desires to be more, to do other things, or whether it's the ad men selling things to customers and trying to make them appear to be something that they're not, or whether it's husbands cheating on their wives, going home and pretending to be the doting husband, but actually secretly having an affair with the secretary at work. This is a show about the facades that people put on, the things that we show to people who are watching versus the behaviour that we actually conduct when they're not. I do feel like this does a very good job of humanising even the most despicable of characters. So like, as I say, a lot of the male characters in this are not really people I would want to call friends, but nearly every single one of them at some point will get a really human moment that makes you realize that, yeah, there's somebody real underneath there. Whatever show they're putting on and whatever despicable behavior they've gotten caught up in, there is a human being in there somewhere. John Slattery's character in particular has one particular moment towards the end of the season. Something happens to him and it causes this outburst of emotion towards his wife. And it, up until that point, he'd always been, well, quite frankly, a character that I'd like to just slap. He's charming. He's very charming. You can understand how this guy might worm his way into various situations and into people's graces. But deep down, he's just, yeah, he's a sleazeball. He's all about the sex. He's all about the drinking. But as I say, in this one moment when he has this outburst and you realise, oh my goodness, this guy is human after all. There is a person underneath all that bravado. What that moment and what others throughout the season do is show the futility of living in a godless world. At various points, some of these characters are even dismissive of God, of religion, are quite willing to maybe poke fun or look down at matters of faith, and I feel like that's very intentional with regards to what this show is revealing, because these are people who have essentially left old belief behind to kind of promote the new ideology of capitalism, of money, of sex, of alcohol, and I think ultimately what we see in this season is that all of those things, once you try and use them to replace any true sense of spiritual life, they fail. Don Draper can't quite keep the illusion together. There are certain parts of his life that are just not satisfying enough, no matter how much he might tell himself that he's a success. You also get the character of Pete Campbell, played by Vincent Kartheiser, who is just a real scumbag. He's like the young one in the office. He's an up and comer, but he's really chasing it to the point where he wears it on his sleeve, and you can tell that this guy would sell his own mother to get to the top. You watch this and you can see this guy just with each maneuver just selling a little bit more of his soul, giving a little bit more of his soul away, and it's quite tragic in many ways, because even he, as I say, has moments throughout the season where it makes you realise no, there is somebody human under there. He's found the pretty wife. He's got the high flying job. He's doing all the things that society tells him he has to, but you can tell he's not happy in that life. and he's looking for other things at times to make him happy. And there are times when you see that sadness, you see that dawning, that realization that this just isn't quite working, and I need to try something else, but without a faith beyond anything other than the system he lives in. He's got nowhere to go but to keep chasing what he's already been chasing. I really liked this first season, and as I say, I really want to watch the rest of the show. I'm excited to see where it goes. We left a lot of the characters on a bit of a downer at the end of this first season, so I want to see where they're going to go from there. But I really liked it. I think it's got very high production value. It's a really pristine looking world. January Jones is really good in this. Now, I only really knew her from X-Men First Class, and I remember when X-Men First Class came out, there was a lot of hype about the fact that January Jones was in it, and I was like, yeah, I don't know who January Jones is. I don't get the hype. And then I saw X-Men First Class, and her character was fine in the film, and she looks pretty in that, and I was just like, okay, I'm not quite sure why everyone was banging on about the fact, oh, January Jones is in X-Men First Class. I get it now. I feel like if I'd have seen this first season of Mad Men back in the day, and then I found out, oh, January Jones has been cast in X-Men First Class, I'd have been like, oh yeah, I'm well up for seeing that. When she starts off in this first season, she's a bit bland. I'm a bit like, I don't know what they're going to do with her, and she's just like this kind of, almost like a Stepford wife. You know, you've ever seen the film Stepford Wives? She has that vibe about her, which is obviously very intentional. But as the season goes on, she starts to have this awakening to the things that are going on around her. And she's part of her storyline is that she goes into psychiatric kind of psychiatry. So she's seeing a psychiatrist, and she's kind of unloading her daily troubles off on this psychiatrist, unbeknownst to her that her husband is actually in touch with the psychiatrist and hearing everything that she's saying to a certain degree. But I just feel like across the course of the season, I really start to sympathise with this woman, and she starts to become more and more human. And there's one particular story where she has this a burgeoning relationship with this child, which the child's mother finds really inappropriate, because there's this one scene where the child asks for a piece of Betty is the name of Jones's character, and this child asks for a piece of Betty's hair, which is a bit weird, but in the moment she gives it to him. She cuts it off and she gives it to him, and she doesn't really think much of it, and then the mother of the child just finds that really inappropriate, and then just won't let her near her son afterwards. But it's just, there's a moment that comes later in the season, it may even be the last episode or second to last, where she sees the child again in a parking lot, and she has a bit of a conversation with him, and then she breaks down. And it's just is this really powerful moment, because it's like you realise that she's got no one. Not even her husband. She's got no one that she can talk to. Even her psychiatrist. This child becomes the one person in her life that she can unload on. And it's just, yeah, it just makes me feel this real sympathy for this character, for this person. And obviously makes me think about how many women of that era must have felt. It's just really well written, brilliant character development, highly engrossing. It might be a bit slow for a lot of people, but if you're into just well acted drama with stuff going on underneath, where characters might say or do one thing, but it really means something else underneath, then I think you owe it to yourself to check out this series, even if it's just the first season. Yeah, do it. But that's my thoughts on the first season of Mad Men. But what about you? Have you seen it? Are you a fan of the show? Do you like where the series goes from here? Am I to look forward to what is in store? or is this as good as it gets? Yes, if you have any comments, do leave them down below. Thank you for watching this video. Do check out my Patreon and membership programs if you would like to support this channel. And until next time, cracking.